On February 13, 1988, in Banqi City, Liaoning Province, China, the atmosphere was abuzz with excitement as the Lunar New Year festivities filled the air. The cheerful chatter and the booming sounds of firecrackers made the spring season more vibrant than ever. In the joyous spirit of the new year, everyone wished for good fortune to bless their small town. However, amid this lively scene, a horrifying massacre silently unfolded. The explosions of firecrackers mixed with gunshots, and the characteristic red of the new year was suddenly tainted with the red of blood. Let's turn back the clock to delve into this shocking case. Welcome to the Crime Documentary Files channel. Early on the morning of February 13, 1988, the Banqi City Police received a report of a male body discovered in a small alley. The victim had been shot multiple times in the chest and abdomen, leading to his death. The police noticed drag marks on the ground, suggesting that this was not the original crime scene. Following the blood trail, investigators arrived at a nearby wooden house. Entering the yard, they were horrified to find two more male bodies lying on their backs in pools of blood. These two looked young, having been shot multiple times, with one of them having his head crushed. Inside the house, they found two additional victims, a man and a woman. The woman lay on the floor, her eyes wide open in shock. The man's condition was even more gruesome. He had multiple bullet wounds to the head and chest, his mouth agape, with blood gushing from his throat. Many speculated that the killer had shot him through the mouth. The most disturbing detail was that the victim's lower body had also been brutally attacked. Despite having witnessed many horrific crimes before, the investigators were deeply shaken by this scene. In 1988, the government had begun to strictly control firearms, with severe penalties for illegal transactions. Yet the killer brazenly used a weapon to slaughter people, showing extreme audacity. The investigation revealed that the two victims inside the house were Mr. Zuo and his wife. One of the young men found dead in the yard was a neighbor, and the one with the crushed head was Mr. Zuo's son. The man found in the alley was a middle-aged neighbor living next door. The murderer had killed 5 people in one go, indicating a deep-seated grudge against the victims. According to the information gathered, Mr. Zuo's family was known for being stingy and quarrelsome, often arguing with neighbors over trivial matters. The police immediately questioned if anyone in the neighborhood held a grudge against the Zuo family, but everyone shook their heads. Although there had been disputes, who would commit such a heinous crime over petty issues? The sudden tragedy that befell the Zuo family left everyone in shock, wondering what could have driven the killer to act so viciously. During the discussions, the neighbors noticed that Mr. Zuo's daughter was missing from the crime scene. They speculated whether she might have been killed elsewhere. Mr. Zuo's daughter, Zuo Shuimai, was well known for her beauty, kindness, and good nature, with many admirers. Zuo Shuimai worked at a pharmaceutical factory in the city and often stayed away from home. While gathering clues at the scene, the police also began searching for Zuo Shuimai to aid in their investigation. The forensic pathologist quickly issued the autopsy report for the shooting incident. The results showed that the 3 members of Mr. Zuo's family were killed far more brutally than the other 2 victims. Strangely, they had stopped breathing at different times. The couple and the young neighbor died between 11 a.m. and 12 p.m. on February 12th, while the son and the other man died early in the morning on February 13th. Based on this detail, the police speculated that after killing the first 3, the murderer barricaded himself in the house to wait for the remaining victims. The murder weapon was identified as a K-56 submachine gun. When fired, it makes a very loud noise, but oddly, no one in the vicinity noticed. While the Special Task Force was discussing methods to resolve the case, they realized a connection to another recent murder. On the evening of February 11, 1988, a shooting occurred in the duty room of the railway officials, resulting in the deaths of 2 police officers and another person. A K-56 submachine gun was stolen. Railway police guns typically do not contain bullets, yet all 3 were killed by the murderer. This suggests that the killer might have brought their own ammunition, then stole the gun from the officers before attacking them. Since the crime occurred late at night, there were no witnesses or clues to identify the culprit. However, the coincidence was that the gun used to kill the 5 people was the same type as the one stolen from the railway officials. Based on this point, The police theorized that the same person might have committed both crimes. To unravel this string of brutal murders, the task force began investigating the case of Mr. Zhuo's family. Investigating social relationships revealed that Mr. Zhuo's daughter, Zhuo Suimai, had always been treated differently by her parents. Due to her rebellious nature, she often stayed away from home. The police then visited Zhuo Suimai's residence at the dormitory of the Banqi City pharmaceutical factory. Her roommate described Zhuo Suimai as a kind-hearted girl who could never have killed her family. She also added that she suspected Zhuo Suimai's boyfriend might have done it because she had witnessed his aggressive behavior when Zhuo Suimai's family forbade their relationship. The roommate even quoted him saying he would kill himself if he couldn't marry Zhuo Suimai. The police quickly identified Zhuo Suimai's boyfriend, Qin Jiaming, who was working at a local warehouse. Qin Jiaming and Zhuo Suimai had been dating for a long time, but due to conflicts, they had broken up and reconciled multiple times. A few days prior, Zhuo Suimai had asked to break up with Qin Jiaming for good. He angrily demanded an explanation, but Zhuo Suimai remained silent. After drinking some alcohol, Qin Jiaming stormed into her dormitory with a knife, threatening Zhuo Suimai and terrifying everyone present. The police immediately went to see him. When Qin Jiaming was suspected of being the perpetrator, his warehouse supervisor defended him. The supervisor insisted that although Qin Jiaming had a bit of a temper, he would never have the courage to commit such a horrific act. Moreover, where would he get a gun to carry out the crime? Despite the supervisor's firm stance, the police remained suspicious. The key point was that both Zhuo Suimai and Qin Jiaming had disappeared after the incident at the Zhuo household. This further convinced the investigators that they were involved in the case. The special task force quickly mobilized to search for the two individuals. Soon, they received some crucial information. On February 17th, Cao Zhongshan, a sales representative from the Banqi Town Marketing and Supply Company, reported to the police that he suspected his friend, Qin Jiaming, was involved in the two shootings. Cao Zhongshan revealed that before fleeing with Zhuo Suimai, Qin Jiaming had asked him to deliver a letter to his mother. On that day, Qin Jiaming appeared extremely nervous, with trembling hands and feet, repeatedly muttering incomprehensible statements. Qin Jiaming confessed that he felt guilty towards his family and prayed that just being alive would be a great happiness in the coming days. After hearing Qin Jiaming admit to killing 8 people, Cao Zhongshan realized the severity of the situation and, fearing repercussions, decided not to cover for him. Based on Cao Zhongshan's testimony, the police believed Qin Jiaming might return to his hometown to hide, so they sent officers there to investigate. In reality, Qin Jiaming was indeed in Zhongjiazi village, but instead of going to a relative's house, he quietly sought refuge at a friend's house named Liu Junyi. Around 3 p.m., when Liu Junyi went out to buy some liquor, he heard rumors that Qin Jiaming was involved in the murder of 8 people and was utterly shocked. Unsure of how to handle the situation, Liu Junyi ultimately decided to report it to the police. Upon receiving this information, the special task force dispatched dozens of officers to Zhongjiazi village surrounding Liu Junyi's house. Believing that Qin Jiaming might be armed, the task force opted not to use force, but instead asked Liu Junyi to steal Qin Jiaming's gun before they moved in to arrest him. Everything happened in a flash. Before Qin Jiaming could react, Liu Junyi rushed in and seized his weapon. Immediately, the police stormed in and apprehended the suspect. Knowing this day would eventually come, Qin Jiaming confessed his crimes without resistance. He claimed that his heinous actions were motivated by a desire to seek justice for his girlfriend. The story begins with Zhuo Suimai, a young woman working at Banqi City's No. 2 pharmaceutical factory in Liaoning province. In her youthful prime, she met Qin Jiaming, a handsome young man. They quickly fell for each other and started dating after only a few meetings. While Qin Jiaming cherished their relationship, Zhuo Suimai remained distant. She even hesitated to reveal their relationship to others. Despite Qin Jiaming's efforts to understand her reasons, Zhuo Suimai steadfastly refused to explain, causing him great heartache. A few days ago, Zhuo Suimai suggested they break up. Naturally, Qin Jiaming couldn't accept this. In desperation, he stood before her with a knife, declaring that if he couldn't marry her, he would end his life in front of her. Moved by his sincerity, Zhuo Suimai finally opened up about her deepest secrets, feeling that at least someone was there to listen and share her burden. Zuo Suemai revealed that she was adopted by the Zuo family after being abandoned on the street. Despite outward appearances, Mr. and Mrs. Zuo were not kind. They frequently scolded and beat her, treating her no better than a stepchild. Mr. Zuo, a former wrestler with a strong physique but a volatile temper, and Mrs. Zuo, known for her sharp tongue and frequent arguments with neighbors, often vented their frustrations on Zuo Shuemai. As a result, she constantly bore bruises. Since childhood, she was forced to do all the heavy chores and was often given leftover food and ragged clothes. Not understanding her true status, young Zuo Shuemai felt deeply saddened, believing her parents didn't love her because of their harsh treatment. Her brother was no different, always cold and blaming her for everything, leading to frequent conflicts. Mr. and Mrs. Zuo insisted that she yield to him, regardless of the situation. Although materially well off, Zuo Shuemai never felt the warmth of a real family. As she grew older and more beautiful, this very trait brought her even more misfortune. Mrs. Zuo planned to have Zuo Shuemai marry her own son in a few years. However, Mr. Zuo had different intentions. He found his daughter increasingly attractive and couldn't control his urges. He made several attempts to take advantage of her. When Zuo Shuemai turned 16, Mr. Zuo thought, "The fruit I've nurtured is finally ripe. It's time to harvest." Taking advantage of a moment when no one else was home, he let his animal instincts take over and sexually assaulted his own daughter. Zuo Shuemai, physically weak compared to her former wrestler father, was unable to resist and could only resign herself to her fate. Too ashamed to tell anyone, Zuo Shuemai's silence only led to more frequent abuse. Eventually, she found the courage to confide in her adoptive mother. However, instead of protecting her, Mrs. Zuo verbally attacked the girl, accusing her of seducing her husband. She then severely beat Zuo Shuemai. Her brother threatened to hurt her if she told anyone else. Zuo Shuemai endured 2 of the darkest years of her life until she was hired at the Banqi pharmaceutical factory. At 18, she left her toxic family and moved into the employee dormitory. For the first time, Zuo Shuemai felt as if she had escaped a living hell. Unfortunately, her despicable father continued to demand she return home to sleep with him. Mr. Zuo even claimed Zuo Shuemai was his personal plaything that no one else could touch. Though she had left that house, Zuo Shuemai still lived in fear, and under the threat of her cruel adoptive father. Zuo Shuemai's life seemed hopeless until she met Qin Jiming. Unfortunately, their good times didn't last long. Despite her efforts to escape, her adoptive father found and tortured her. He even threatened that if she didn't break up with Qin Jiming, he would harm him as well. Feeling unworthy of Qin Jiming's love and wanting to protect him, Zuo Shuemai agreed to her adoptive father's demands. She thought that if she was decisive enough, Qin Jiming would give up, but he wasn't that kind of person. He loved her deeply and couldn't let go easily. Seeing his genuine affection, Zuo Shuemai decided to tell him everything the Zuo family had done to her. When Qin Jiming learned about the abuse from her adoptive family, he was furious. He hugged her tightly and promised that he would make sure those people could never harm her again. He began planning his revenge against the Zuo family and to escape with her. Knowing that Mr. Zuo was a former wrestler, Qin Jiaming realized he couldn't fight him barehanded or with a knife. The most effective solution was a gun. Having previously served in the militia, Qin Jiaming knew that certain railway crossings were guarded by police. After work on February 11th, Qin Jiaming walked to the police duty room at the railway intersection. Following his plan, Qin Jiaming engaged the officers in friendly conversation, sharing his past militia experience, which lowered their guard. Taking advantage of this, he asked to see their guns. Since the guns weren't loaded, the officers handed them over. Prepared with ammunition, Qin Jiaming secretly loaded the gun and fired, killing the 2 officers and a gatekeeper. After completing the first part of his crime, Qin Jiaming hurried to find Zuo Shuemai and told her everything. He felt no fear and asked her to point out her adoptive parents' house. Initially bewildered, Zuo Shuemai eventually agreed to assist him. By the next day, February 12th, Zuo Shuemai led Qin Jiming to Mr. Zuo's house. At that time, her adoptive parents were chatting animatedly with their neighbors. Her adoptive father was furious when he saw Zuo Shuemai and Qin Jiaming holding hands defiantly in front of him. Just as he was about to start cursing, a bullet pierced his abdomen. Witnessing this, the mother panicked and tried to run but couldn't escape. The young neighbor who rushed into the yard was also hit by multiple bullets. After taking down 3 people, Qin Jiming noticed Mr. Zuo still gasping on the floor. He grabbed Mr. Zuo's head and repeatedly attacked his mouth and genitals with the weapon to vent his anger. The loud sounds went unnoticed by the neighbors, who assumed it was just children setting off firecrackers for the Lunar New Year. Qin Jiming didn't leave immediately. He planned to eradicate the entire family. Zuo Xuemai's brother wasn't home at the time. She mentioned that her brother had a habit of drinking. Sure enough, around 4 a.m. on February 13th, her brother staggered into the yard, drunk, and was instantly shot through the chest, dying on the spot. Even though the victim was already dead, Qin Jiming viciously struck his head with a wooden stick multiple times. After killing 4 people, Qin Jiming and Zuo Xuemai prepared to flee. As they stepped outside, they encountered an early rising neighbor. Qin Jiming, looking menacing, ignored Zuo Xuemai's pleas and mercilessly shot the neighbor. Terrified, Zuo Xuemai stood by. The neighbor, still barely alive, tried to crawl away but succumbed to blood loss shortly after. In this manner, Qin Jiming took 8 lives within a day. He felt he had removed a thorn from his side and fulfilled his revenge for Zuo Xuemai. Despite his brutal actions, Qin Jiming later felt remorseful. He and Zuo Xuemai went on the run, with Qin Jiming leaving a letter for his mother, hoping she would forgive him. Eventually, after several attempts to evade capture, Qin Jiming was turned in by his own relatives. This shows that no matter who the perpetrator is, once a grave mistake is made, even family cannot shield them. Even while being handcuffed, Qin Jiming tried to protect Zuo Xuemai, claiming she was a hostage he had taken. For the murder of 8 people, Qin Jiming received the death penalty. Zuo Xuemai, charged with aiding and abetting, was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Upon learning of Qin Jiming's death sentence, Zuo Xuemai cried, believing she had ruined his life. The cause of this tragedy is not complicated. Qin Jiming's desire for revenge was the root of the crime. He disregarded the law, leading to his dark fate. Both Qin Jiming and Zuo Xuemai should have sought legal intervention instead of resorting to murder. This story teaches us to control our anger and find smarter ways to resolve issues to avoid harming others and bringing disaster upon ourselves. In this case, Zuo Xuemai was both a victim and a perpetrator. She was a victim of the Zuo family's abuse and should have reported it to the police instead of supporting her lover's inhumane actions. As for the Zuo family, Mr. Zuo's abusive behavior indirectly caused the tragedy. Legally, the wife and son were not at fault, but morally, they were completely wrong. Thank you for watching today's video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the Crime Documentary Files channel.